You lock the stall door and believe you are safe. That is a pure illusion. Today we analyze 6 real deaths in public restrooms where the lock on the door became a death sentence instead of protection. Watch closely because your finale might be waiting exactly where you least expect it. October 14th, 1980, Winnipeg, Canada. The cold autumn wind sweeps across the empty paths of Assiniboine Park. Near the edge of the trees stands a solid concrete building. It is a public municipal restroom built thick and windowless to survive harsh winters. Inside, the damp air holds a faint, strange odor. The heavy steel entry door slams shut, cutting off the noise of the wind. Fluorescent lights buzz loudly overhead, casting a pale glow. The ceramic tiles are freezing to the touch. It is a completely ordinary public facility designed for basic function. But beneath the cold floor, a volatile chemical reality is quietly waiting. 58-year-old Arthur Pendleton steps out of the chill and into the dim shelter. He is a retired accountant out for his daily afternoon walk. His routine is a rigid anchor in his quiet life. Every single day, he walks exactly 2 miles. He stops at the specific public restroom, uses the facility, and enjoys a quiet smoke before heading home. He unzips his heavy coat, his hands numb from the dropping temperature. He walks into the 3rd stall and slides the metal latch locked. He expects nothing but the dull routine of a typical Tuesday. He is completely unaware of the invisible hazard simmering just inches beneath him. A modern city sewer system is engineered to flow freely. Gravity washes human waste into massive underground lines. Tall external pipes on the roof allow toxic underground gases to escape harmlessly into the sky. Every toilet also has a curved U-shaped pipe underneath it called a P-trap. This trap holds a small pool of water. That water acts as a physical plug, stopping sewer gas from coming up into the room. That is how the system keeps you safe. But 3 weeks earlier, a severe autumn storm washed a massive amount of mud into the main line directly beneath this park. The specific ventilation shaft for this restroom block became totally clogged with a hardened plug of wet leaves. Deep underground, tons of organic waste sat stagnant. Without oxygen, bacteria aggressively broke down the waste. This biological process created sewer gas. It is a highly flammable mixture composed primarily of pure methane. Because the vital rooftop vents were completely blocked, the expanding gas had absolutely nowhere to go. Pressure violently built up inside the underground pipes. It followed the simple laws of physics and took the path of least resistance. The pressurized gas pushed straight up through the water in the toilet's P-trap. It quietly bubbled into the 3rd stall. For 3 straight days, pure methane silently filled the small, unventilated concrete space. Methane diffuses quickly, but it remains highly explosive in enclosed pockets. Here, it just sat trapped in the stall like an invisible pool of aviation fuel. Arthur finishes his business and stands up in the narrow space. He reaches deep into the pocket of his coat. His stiff fingers brush against a silver Zippo lighter and a pack of cigarettes. If he simply flushes the toilet and walks out the door, the gas will eventually dissipate harmlessly. Instead, he pulls out a cigarette and places it firmly between his dry lips. The air around him is thick with the sweet, rotting smell of the accumulated gas. Unfortunately, decades of heavy smoking have completely ruined his sense of smell. He cannot detect the danger. He thumbs the rough flint wheel of the lighter. Time artificially slows down to a crawl. The metal wheel grinds sharply against the flint. A tiny piece of metal sparks, glowing bright orange in the dim stall. For a fraction of a millisecond, a microscopic shard of burning metal hangs suspended in the methane-saturated air. Methane requires a very specific mixture with oxygen to ignite. If it is too dense, it will not burn. But this cramped stall contains exactly a 10% concentration. It is the absolute perfect explosive recipe. The tiny spark violently ignites the dense gas pocket. A supersonic shockwave of expanding thermal energy and extreme pressure erupts directly from the porcelain bowl. The sheer concussive force acts exactly like a solid physical battering ram, moving at unimaginable speed. The blast travels vertically at over 1,000 feet per second. Arthur is immediately struck by the massive overpressure wave. He is violently launched upward by the sheer kinetic energy of the explosion. His body acts as a human projectile within the tight concrete shaft. He impacts the reinforced concrete ceiling with devastating momentum. The blunt force trauma to his cranium and cervical spine is absolute and catastrophic. The incredible physical impact causes immediate structural failure of his skeletal system. Instant loss of consciousness occurs upon the ceiling strike. The subsequent rapid descent onto the fractured ceramic floor causes secondary, non-survivable physical damage. Cardiac arrest is immediate. The entire brutal sequence from the tiny spark to his clinical death takes less than 0.8 of a second. A thick, choking cloud of gray smoke billows out from beneath the crumpled metal door of the stall. The heavy steel entry door of the building blows wide open, violently slamming against the exterior brick wall. Then, an eerie silence returns to the empty park. The cold wind resumes, slowly blowing dead leaves into the smoking doorway. Inside, the shattered fluorescent light flickers one final time and dies. The silver Zippo lighter rests perfectly intact on the wet ruined tiles. It is still faintly warm from the fatal spark. Water from the destroyed plumbing continuously sprays against the charred wall. It creates a hollow, rhythmic hiss in the dark. The city would later mandate strict inspections of all park ventilation systems, but right now there is only the freezing breeze and the quiet hum of the broken water pipe standing watch over the forensic aftermath. August 12, 2004, Interstate 10, West Texas. It is 3:15 in the morning. The Chihuahuan desert is completely pitch black. The oppressive daytime heat has finally faded, leaving the air dry and heavy. The smell of sun-baked asphalt lingers in the cool wind. At mile marker 142, an isolated highway rest area sits bathed in the harsh glare of streetlights. It is a simple rectangular brick building offering a brief sanctuary for tired travelers. A solitary sedan is parked in the empty, silent lot. Inside the men's room, a cheap air conditioning unit rattles against the cinder block walls. The fluorescent lights overhead flicker and buzz loudly. It feels boring, mundane, and utterly disconnected from the high-speed chaos of the interstate. 58-year-old Thomas Vance stands at the stainless steel sink. He is splashing freezing water onto his tired face. Thomas is a regional sales manager. He has been driving through the night to make an early morning meeting in El Paso. His shoulders ache deeply from gripping the steering wheel for 7 straight hours. He looks at his reflection in the scratched mirror and exhales a long, slow breath. He is exhausted, but he feels the familiar relief of being safely off the open road. He reaches for a rough paper towel from the metal dispenser. He thinks only about the remaining 3 hours of his drive. He is completely unaware that his timeline is about to end. He believes the thick brick walls around him are an absolute shield against the dangerous world outside. Just 400 yards away is a rolling catastrophe. A massive 18-wheel commercial truck is hauling heavy steel pipes down the dark eastbound lane. It is moving at exactly 72 miles per hour. The total weight of the vehicle and its cargo is over 80,000 pounds. The driver inside the cab has been pushing his physical limits for 2 solid days. Human biology is bound by strict, unforgiving rules. When a person stays awake for over 20 hours, their brain inevitably begins to shut down. This dangerous phenomenon is called microsleep. The brain forces the body to sleep for 3 to 5 seconds without the person even realizing it. The heavy diesel engine roars steadily through the desert night. The dashed highway lines flash by in a hypnotic, endless rhythm. Inside the dark cab, the driver's heavy eyelids flutter and finally close completely. His heavy work boot remains pressed hard against the accelerator pedal. The massive truck drifts silently out of its designated lane. Its thick rubber tires cross the shoulder rumble strip. This creates a violent, vibrating noise against the road. But the deeply exhausted driver does not wake up. The truck leaves the paved highway entirely. It hits the wide, grassy median, separating the fast road from the quiet rest stop. It does not slow down even a fraction. 80,000 pounds of rolling steel plow through the dry dirt. It kicks up a massive cloud of dust. The physics of the situation are simple and deadly. A heavy object moving fast holds massive destructive energy. Inside the bathroom, Thomas throws his wet paper towel into the metal trash can. Suddenly, he hears a deep, unnatural rumbling sound rapidly approaching from the outside. The concrete floor beneath his heavy boots begins to vibrate violently. The cheap mirror rattles aggressively against the brick wall. He turns his head toward the entrance. His brain struggles to process the immense noise, and the world seems to freeze. The blinding high-beam headlights of the oncoming truck pierce right through the small frosted glass window of the door. Thomas raises his hands in a futile gesture of defense. The collision is absolute and catastrophic. A standard brick facade provides absolutely zero structural resistance against 40 tons of kinetic mass. The front grille of the massive truck obliterates the exterior wall instantly. Thousands of heavy clay bricks, thick steel rebars, and shattered wooden roof beams explode inward. Thomas is immediately caught in the direct path of the catastrophic structural collapse. The blunt force trauma to his torso and cranium is overwhelming. The extreme kinetic energy transfer causes instantaneous, non-survivable displacement of his vital organs. Massive external pressure completely compromises his entire skeletal framework. Instant loss of consciousness occurs exactly at the millisecond of impact. Complete cardiac and respiratory arrest follows immediately. There is no pain. There is absolutely no time for fear. The human body simply ceases to function when subjected to such overwhelming mechanical forces. The heavy roof of the restroom collapses directly onto the crumpled hood of the truck. A massive, suffocating cloud of pulverized brick dust and white drywall powder billows out into the yellow light. The deafening crash is quickly replaced by an eerie mechanical aftermath. The massive diesel engine of the truck has finally stalled and died. However, the ruptured radiator hisses violently in the dark. It leaks hot green coolant onto the shattered bathroom tiles. Inside the ruined, crushed cab, the dazed driver slowly opens his eyes to a nightmare. Deep inside the rubble of the destroyed restroom, an unbroken water pipe sprays a steady, lonely stream of water. It washes over a crushed stainless steel sink buried in the dirt. The quiet rest area is no longer a sanctuary. It stands in the desert as a cold monument to a terrifying reality. July 2nd, 2000, British Columbia, Canada. It is 6 in the morning at a highly remote public campground. A freezing mist rolls slowly through the tall, ancient pine trees. The cold air smells strongly of damp earth and the bitter remains of old campfire smoke. At the absolute edge of the dirt clearing stands a solitary wooden outhouse. It serves as the only public restroom facility for dozens of surrounding campsites. It is a primitive, unpainted box built directly over a deep dirt pit. Inside the tight, windowless space, the air is totally stagnant. It smells heavily of harsh chemical deodorizers and old rotting wood. The heavy plank door is secured entirely by a simple metal hook. It is a fragile structure of human routine, dropped directly into an unforgiving wilderness. 24-year-old Mary Beth Miller unzips her green nylon tent and steps out into the freezing morning air. She is a dedicated elementary school teacher on a weekend camping trip. She pulls a thick fleece jacket tight across her chest. She walks quietly along the narrow dirt path. The entire campground is perfectly silent. Every other camper is still fast asleep inside their thin nylon shelters. She walks directly toward the public outhouse. She seeks the most basic human comfort before the busy camp wakes up. She expects nothing but a mundane, quiet moment of privacy. She fully trusts the invisible, established boundaries between human recreational spaces and the wild forest. But the wild does not respect our imaginary rules. Black bears are naturally timid scavengers. They usually avoid loud noises and human presence, preferring to safely eat wild berries deep in the brush. That is the biological norm. However, a severe summer drought has completely ruined the natural food supply in the region. Deep in the shadowy woods, a large male black bear is starving. Extreme hunger totally overrides his natural evolutionary fear of humans. A bear has an incredibly powerful sense of smell. Its nose is biologically engineered to detect faint food sources from over a mile away. This specific bear has been quietly circling the perimeter of the sleeping campground all night long. He is no longer a passive scavenger. He is an active, desperate predator. He follows the airborne scent trail of cooking oil, garbage, and human presence right to the edge of the trees. He stops exactly outside the wooden outhouse. The primitive public structure strongly broadcasts human activity. The hungry predator waits in absolute silence in the wet green ferns. He weighs over 250 pounds. His thick muscles are built specifically for explosive bursts of overwhelming speed. Inside the dim stall, Mary Beth finishes using a small bottle of pink hand sanitizer. She turns her body toward the heavy wooden door. She is completely unaware of the massive animal waiting patiently just 3 feet away. Only a thin layer of cheap pine separates her from an apex predator. She reaches out her warm hand and lifts the cold metal latch. Time artificially slows down to an agonizing crawl. The metal hook slides out of its rusty eyelet with a sharp, distinct clink. She pushes the rough wooden door outward into the cold morning air. The rusted hinges squeak loudly, breaking the absolute silence of the sleeping forest. She takes exactly one single step forward onto the dirt path. The pale morning light hits her face. Suddenly, a massive, solid black shadow totally blocks the rising sun. A defensive bear will usually stand up on its hind legs and roar to scare away a threat. But a true predatory attack is entirely different. It is completely silent. The massive animal lunges forward with terrifying kinetic energy. Mary Beth barely has a fraction of a millisecond to register the dark shape. She raises her empty hands in a desperate, instinctive gesture of defense. It is a totally futile movement against the overwhelming laws of physics. The physical collision is absolute and completely one-sided. The sheer kinetic force of the moving mass instantly knocks her backward onto the hard dirt. The extreme, blunt force trauma to her torso causes immediate structural failure of her rib cage. The animal possesses specialized evolutionary tools designed to effortlessly breach heavy biological defenses. The resulting physical interaction causes massive, irreversible damage to her vital soft tissues. The severe physical trauma to her neck violently severs the vital blood vessels carrying oxygen to her brain. Her internal blood pressure drops instantly to a fatal, non-sustaining level. Total loss of consciousness happens almost immediately upon the heavy impact. The massive, non-survivable bodily injuries trigger immediate respiratory failure. Complete cardiac arrest inevitably follows just seconds later. There is absolutely no drawn-out struggle. The fragile human biological system simply collapses entirely under the overwhelming mechanical force of nature. The brutal sequence is incredibly fast, clinical, and totally fatal. Minutes later, the violent noise completely stops. The heavy bear silently drags its massive frame back into the thick tree line. It vanishes entirely like a ghost in the morning fog. The remote public campground remains completely still. The cold wind gently pushes the wooden door of the outhouse. It slowly swings back and forth on its rusty hinges. It creaks softly into the quiet, indifferent forest. A small plastic bottle of hand sanitizer lies abandoned in the wet dirt. It is heavily surrounded by deep, wide paw prints pressed firmly into the mud. The mist continues to roll slowly through the ancient pine trees. The distant sound of a waking bird echoes through the green canopy. The modern illusion of absolute safety has been violently erased. The cold biological laws of nature stand perfectly victorious over the human tragedy. November 15, 2011. Provo, Utah. It is 6:30 in the morning on a massive commercial construction site. The temperature is hovering just below freezing. A brutal winter wind howls across the exposed concrete foundations. The air smells strongly of heavy diesel exhaust and frozen dirt. In the center of the muddy lot stands a standard blue plastic portable restroom. It is a mass-produced public facility meant to serve 50 different contractors throughout the long workday. Inside the cramped cabin, the air is freezing. It smells sharply of chemical blue dye and cold plastic. Heavy machinery is already grinding to life in the dark morning shadow. 35-year-old Adam Davis zips up his heavy canvas work jacket. He is a framing carpenter. He is already exhausted before the heavy labor of the shift even truly begins. He steps out of the freezing wind and into the blue plastic cabin. He pushes the thin door shut and slides the metal latch locked. He aggressively rubs his freezing hands together. He is simply taking a 3-minute break away from the biting cold. He expects absolute mundane safety inside this quiet, isolated little box. Construction sites are inherently dangerous environments. A single overlooked detail can quickly trigger a massive disaster. To keep workers warm and prevent freshly poured concrete from freezing, crews use massive propane forced air heaters. These powerful machines are commonly called torpedo heaters. They blast a constant roaring stream of 600-degree heat directly into the cold air. That is the necessary industrial norm for winter building, but human error is a constant, invisible threat. 30 minutes earlier, another worker dragged a running heater across the frozen mud. He carelessly left the metal exhaust nozzle pointing directly at the back wall of the portable toilet. It was sitting just 3 feet away. Portable restrooms are manufactured using high-density polyethylene plastic. It is a cheap, lightweight material perfectly suited for temporary structures. However, it is fundamentally highly sensitive to extreme heat. When exposed to direct thermal energy, this specific plastic softens, heavily warps, and rapidly melts. Outside the cabin, the heavy vibrations of a massive passing excavator violently shake the frozen ground. The running propane heater slowly rattles across the dirt. It creeps inches closer to the back of the portable toilet. The intense, invisible column of extreme heat blasts directly against the thin, blue plastic exterior. Inside the cabin, Adam reaches for the toilet paper dispenser. Suddenly, the temperature inside the tiny room violently spikes. The air instantly feels heavy and brutally hot. It feels exactly like the inside of an industrial oven. He turns his head around in deep confusion. The intense thermal distortion ripples across his vision, warping the reality of the room. The blue plastic wall directly behind him begins to blister, sag, and bubble violently. Thick, black, acrid smoke pours into the confined space from the melting wall seams. The heavy plastic is literally turning into a boiling liquid right before his eyes. Adam forcibly inhales the sudden wave of toxic fumes. He immediately realizes the catastrophic danger. He lunges forward toward the door and aggressively grabs the latch. He pushes against the door with every ounce of his strength, but the door absolutely does not move. The extreme heat from the back wall has rapidly transferred through the structure. It totally deformed the entire frame of the cabin. The plastic door has physically melted and permanently fused into the surrounding door jamb. He is completely locked inside a rapidly shrinking, boiling box. The highly flammable polyethylene suddenly reaches its ultimate ignition point. The entire back wall violently erupts into bright, roaring orange flames. The massive fire completely consumes the remaining oxygen inside the tiny space in a matter of seconds. The thick, toxic black smoke contains highly lethal levels of carbon monoxide and hydrogen cyanide. The chemical inhalation is massive and overwhelming. Adam experiences rapid, severe respiratory failure. His central nervous system shuts down almost immediately from the extreme lack of oxygen. Total loss of consciousness occurs within mere seconds. He collapses to the floor long before the actual flames even reach him. The subsequent exposure to the extreme thermal energy causes catastrophic, non-survivable physical trauma to his vital biological systems. Clinical death is highly rapid and absolutely inevitable. The fragile human body is entirely defenseless against such a concentrated, enclosed thermal event. Outside, desperate co-workers scream over the deafening roar of the machinery. They rush toward the blazing fire with useless, small, handheld fire extinguishers. But it is far too late to change the physics of the situation. The structure burns with absolute ferocity. It completely collapses into a violent puddle of burning liquid plastic and black smoke within minutes. An hour later, the local fire department quietly hoses down the smoking, blackened dirt. All the heavy diesel machines have been turned off. The aggressively loud construction site is now completely, terrifyingly silent. Only the cold Utah wind blows across the black scorch mark on the frozen ground. A single, heavily charred yellow hard hat rests quietly in the gray ashes. It sits in the mud as a cold monument to a routine morning instantly transformed into a mechanical nightmare. August 14, 2010, Tonto National Forest, Arizona. It is 2 o'clock in the afternoon. The Sonoran Desert is baking under a merciless summer sun. The temperature is well over 100 degrees. The air is bone dry, smelling sharply of hot dust and sweet creosote bushes. At the base of a towering red rock canyon sits a small, isolated public rest area. It features a single heavy concrete public restroom building with a slanted metal roof. The structure is built exactly like a military bunker to survive the harsh environment. Inside the men's room, the thick walls completely block out the intense heat. It is dark, cool and perfectly quiet. 46-year-old David Miller steps out of his family's air-conditioned SUV. He is a father of two, deeply exhausted from a long morning of hiking. He leaves the car engine running for his wife and kids. He walks across the gravel lot and steps into the concrete restroom. He pushes the heavy steel door closed behind him. He expects nothing but a brief, completely mundane moment of privacy before the long drive back to Phoenix. He is totally unaware of the massive geographical trap he just walked into. The Arizona desert is defined by extreme, sudden changes in weather. During the late summer monsoon season, the dry, baked desert soil acts exactly like hard concrete. It absolutely cannot absorb heavy rainfall. Instead, the water instantly runs off the surface. When a massive storm hits the mountains miles away, millions of gallons of water funnel directly into narrow, dry riverbeds, called arroyos. This creates a flash flood. It is not just water. It is a dense, churning wall of heavy mud, boulders, and ripped-up trees moving at highway speeds. Decades ago, county planners built this specific public restroom directly in the center of a natural, ancient drainage channel. Right now, a violent thunderstorm has just dropped 3 inches of rain 5 miles upstream. The flood is already rushing down the canyon. But over the rest stop, the sun is still shining brightly. David stands at the stainless steel sink, splashing cool water onto his tired face. Suddenly, a strange, low-frequency vibration begins to shake the solid concrete floor beneath his hiking boots. A deep, unnatural roar echoes off the canyon walls. It sounds exactly like a massive freight train rapidly approaching. He grabs a rough paper towel and turns toward the exit. Time artificially slows down to a terrifying, agonizing crawl. David reaches out to push the heavy metal handle of the outward opening door. At that exact millisecond, a 6-foot-high wall of churning brown water violently slams into the exterior of the building. The physical collision is absolute and catastrophic. Water is incredibly heavy, weighing over 62 pounds per cubic foot. The massive hydraulic wave instantly pins the outward opening door perfectly flush against its metal frame, sealing it tighter than a bank vault. The sheer physical pressure against the exterior surface instantly exceeds 10,000 pounds of force. It is physically impossible for any human being, or even a team of people, to push it open. David is instantly sealed inside a dark concrete box. The muddy, raging water forcefully explodes through the high ventilation grates and the wide gap under the door. It blasts into the small room exactly like a high-pressure fire hose. The water level rises with terrifying, unnatural speed. Within 20 seconds, the freezing, debris-filled water reaches his chest. The heavy concrete walls easily withstand the immense external pressure, but this durability seals his fate. The water rapidly hits the ceiling, completely eliminating all breathable air in the locked room. David is trapped in total, airless darkness. The biological reality of drowning is simple and highly predictable. As the oxygen supply is totally cut off, the brain triggers a desperate, involuntary inhalation reflex. The sudden intake of heavily oxygen-depleted, muddy water causes immediate catastrophic failure of the respiratory system. The dense fluid physically displaces the remaining air in the lungs, instantly preventing critical gas exchange in the bloodstream. Severe cellular hypoxia sets in rapidly. Total loss of consciousness occurs in less than 2 minutes. The extreme physical stress and total lack of oxygen trigger immediate cardiac arrest. The fragile human respiratory system simply shuts down completely under the absolute mechanical force of the rushing water. The brutal sequence is fast, terrifyingly clinical, and totally fatal. 20 minutes later, the violent desert flood rapidly drains away. It disappears back into the dry earth as quickly as it arrived. The brutal desert sun continues to bake the wet rocks. The heavy concrete restroom remains perfectly standing, now heavily caked in thick, dark brown mud. Out in the parking lot, the family SUV has been pushed violently against a large tree, but the cabin is intact. The radio still plays a quiet, cheerful song. A single muddy hiking boot is slowly washed out from beneath the jammed metal door of the restroom. It comes to rest quietly on the wet gravel. The vast ancient canyon remains completely silent, absolutely indifferent to the sudden human tragedy. November 18, 2013. Limpopo Province, South Africa. It is 2 o'clock in the afternoon. The African sun beats down mercilessly on the dry, dusty earth. The temperature is pushing well over 104 degrees Fahrenheit. At the edge of a vast agricultural estate stands a small, solid cinder block restroom facility. It is built specifically for the dozens of daily field workers and transit truck drivers who pass through the property. Inside the men's stall, the thick concrete walls offer a rare, shaded sanctuary from the blistering heat. The air is stagnant, smelling faintly of harsh bleach and dry dirt. The porcelain toilet sits quietly in the dim light. The water inside the bowl is a cool, dark mirror. It is a perfectly normal, necessary fixture of rural infrastructure. But this specific plumbing system is connected directly to the wild, untamed bushveld. 59-year-old Johan de Blank wipes the heavy sweat from his forehead. He is the farm's strict operational manager. He has spent the last 6 hours walking the fence lines under the brutal sun. He is severely dehydrated and physically exhausted. He walks away from the noisy, diesel-smelling tractor, sheds and heads toward the quiet restroom block. He steps into the cool, dark stall and closes the heavy wooden door. He unbuckles his heavy leather work belt. He is simply seeking 2 minutes of quiet relief and shade. He completely trusts the sterile, manufactured environment of the bathroom. He expects it to be totally separate from the dangerous wildlife of the African bush. But rural plumbing provides a perfect hidden highway for nature. The restroom's drainage pipe connects directly to a large, underground septic field on the edge of the property. During extreme heat waves, cold-blooded reptiles desperately seek moisture and shade to regulate their body temperature. An adult cobra, one of the most highly venomous snakes on the continent, found the open discharge pipe. The snake followed the cool draft of air and the smell of water directly up the PVC tubing. The plumbing under every toilet features a curved U-shape called a P-trap. This trap constantly holds a small pool of water to block sewer gas. However, snakes are excellent swimmers and can easily hold their breath for extended periods. The 6-foot cobra effortlessly glided through the submerged trap. It surfaced silently into the toilet bowl. It curled its thick, scaled body perfectly inside the dark, cool porcelain rim. It is now resting completely out of sight, just inches above the waterline. Johan steps up to the toilet. The bathroom is poorly lit. He does not look directly down into the bowl. He simply turns around and sits heavily onto the plastic seat. The sudden movement triggers a primal defensive reflex faster than human thought. The sudden, massive shadow of the human dropping down completely terrifies the hidden reptile. The cobra is instantly trapped in a highly confined space with absolutely no escape route. Its biological defense mechanism triggers immediately. The snake strikes upward with blinding, supersonic speed. It takes only a fraction of a second. The cobra's sharp fangs easily puncture the soft, highly vascular tissue of Johan's upper thigh. The snake violently injects a massive dose of concentrated venom deep into his muscle tissue. Johan gasps in sudden shock. He leaps upward, violently stumbling backward against the concrete wall. He sees the dark shape of the snake splash back into the water. The venom is a profoundly potent neurotoxin. This means the chemical immediately attacks the body's nervous system. It acts exactly like a pair of microscopic scissors. It instantly cuts the vital communication lines between the brain and the muscles. Without these electrical signals, the muscles simply stop working. The physiological collapse is terrifyingly rapid and highly clinical. Within minutes, Johan experiences severe dizziness and massive neurological failure. His eyelids begin to droop heavily, a condition known as ptosis. He tries to call for help, but his throat muscles are already paralyzed. He cannot form words. The neurotoxin quickly paralyzes his diaphragm, the massive internal muscle responsible for pulling air into the lungs. Severe respiratory distress sets in rapidly. He experiences rapid physiological respiratory failure while retaining consciousness. He collapses heavily onto the dusty tile floor. Total loss of consciousness occurs as his brain is entirely deprived of oxygen. The complete paralysis of the respiratory system inevitably leads to catastrophic asphyxiation. Cardiac arrest follows immediately after the oxygen levels drop below a critical, life-sustaining threshold. The entire biological failure takes less than 20 minutes. The nearest rural clinic is over an hour away. There is absolutely no access to life-saving anti-venom in time. The fragile human biological machine simply ceases to function under the overwhelming chemical attack. Outside, the heavy farm equipment continues to roar in the distance. The oppressive afternoon heat shimmers visibly off the dry dirt. Inside the quiet stall, Johann's dusty leather hat rests upside down on the floor. A single green blowfly buzzes loudly against the small frosted glass window. The large dark snake has completely vanished. It silently slipped back down into the cool water of the plumbing pipe, retreating deep into the underground darkness. The quiet, sterile illusion of human safety has been perfectly shattered by the ancient, unforgiving rules of the wild. These victims did absolutely nothing wrong. They were simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. Here is the question: does cosmic justice actually exist, or are we all just pawns in a game of blind chance? Your verdict matters. Write it in the comments below. If you value cold facts over comfortable fairy tales, subscribe to the channel now.